Okay. So listen, y'all been wondering where I've been. If you can tell by my face, I've been sick again. Got off all the antibiotics and turned around and had a whole bunch of issues coming off the antibiotics because my digestive tract and my pancreas and everything is so sensitive. And then there's a tummy bug going around. So guess what? The tummy bug got me. It's not been fun to be me, y'all. But I finally got to kind of checking back in, and I don't do a lot of input on the Summerwells case unless it's something that the family has done, and that I can listen to them or see them offer up the information. So I did listen to the interview room's interview with Jeannie and Trish, and I've only got like 43 minutes through it, but I wanted to kind of hit on what I'd seen. I've got notes, so I'm going to be licking my fingers and throwing pages, so just warning you. At the very first of it, something that irritated me at the very first of it. Now, I tell y'all, I like Chris more than I dislike him, but some things he does kind of irritates me. But at like 5 minutes and 31 seconds in, he's like, today it's going to be truthful and factual. And now I'm all about victims stating their story, telling their story, and getting the story out there. But until it's been investigated, gone through a court of law, and had a ruling, it's very difficult to say it's factual and truthful. You can say that this is this victim's story that I'm allowing her to state. And that's great, because we have to take a victim story as a victim story. And we can all digest it and decipher it how we think we need to. And we all know most likely she's telling the absolute truth. But I just found that to be kind of something out of character for him, because then at like 41 minutes and 8 seconds in, he slows her down to keep her from being overwhelmed. It reminds her of the power she has to press the charges. Then he apologizes for being too forward, and he shouldn't have done that. And this is the pressure, pull back, pressure, pull back, pressure, pull back technique. That is, I'm going to apply a little pressure, and then when I see you get squeamish, I'm going to pull back. And it's just like if you work with horses. If you apply pressure to that horse, you apply pressure to that horse, and they're applying pressure back, you don't stop applying pressure until they break or they bolt. And then you realize you hit that threshold. That's where your threshold is. And when you're applying pressure and then that horse gives to the pressure, then you go, okay, we're good. And that trains that horse that, okay, you can trust me. I'm going to ask just enough of you, and then I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond when you give me what I want. So, yeah, is it useful interrogation? It absolutely is. But I also think it's kind of preying upon her victim status and her victim mentality a little bit, because that is exactly how these men got away with what they were doing. Pressure, pull back, get to the line when they feel her buck and start to wig out, they pull back and they calm her down, and then they go back. And I just found that distasteful, but that's just me. Like I said, I really appreciate more about him than I dislike, but that's just something that kind of wigged me out a little bit. I'm going to go through this quickly because I just don't feel like going through it in depth right now, but I want y'all to talk in the comments below. Now, she said that this started around the age of 5. And I will say again that Chris hit on something I've been talking about the entire time, that sexual abuse is normally a past behavior that involves children perpetuating past behavior into future behavior, and therefore it becomes a learned behavior and a cycle of violence. And this can be the same for neglect, alcohol and drug, mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. They're all learned behaviors, and they all have a vicious victim cycle. She said it began at 5, and that she labeled the dynamics of her family, that her mother married Dawn's dad, and everything kind of happened when they moved to a new house. So that kind of makes me think, was there a maladjustment period that occurred during this move that prompted these behaviors to come out, that prompted Dawn to engage at that moment? Was there something specific that happened that I would kind of put in the maladjustment? He did not handle too well, he did not adjust too well to a change, and therefore it prompted this behavior? Or was he just kind of always planning it and just finally got around to it when he thought the time was right? I don't know, but I just thought that it was weird that it happened right about the time that they moved. She said that Dawn used tactics that grew, like playing the dare game, but always trying to place her in a perceived seat of power where you can say stop, but then stop to him really didn't mean stop, so it was just a perceived state of power. It wasn't really power, and that's classic. That's classic for anybody that is trying to take advantage of someone. They give you kind of this inverted dominance where you think you're the one calling the shots, but they're just allowing you to feel like you're manipulating it because you think you're pulling the strings, but they're pulling the strings on your hands that are pulling the strings on the event. And so therefore they are in true control. But people don't see that. Something that I picked up on, she said that Dawn was around 12 or 13 when he began using more aggressive tactics, doing more aggressive things. And for him to be 12 or 13 and going into this very physical, very thought out, for him to have started when he was around 7 and then to advance to where this was a daily occurrence in a home that had multiple children and multiple sets of eyes on him, then we know that this is probably something that he mastered young because it was probably occurring to him, and therefore he picked up the skills that he then applied to his victims. So, and like, let's just preface this that I'm not saying anybody's guilty of anything. This is just this lady's statement. I'm trying to look into it and see if these are the alleged issues and this is the alleged truth. What can we derive from this? If he moved on to have this be a nightly occurrence and also attempting to do this to friends of the family that stayed the night, and it became a daily ritualistic thing by 12 to 13, then he was using tactics of somebody that was mentally much more mature, and he was probably learning those tactics because they'd probably been done to him. It seems like he was very stealthy and very adept in the way that he grew his little games to groom her. And that tells me that most likely this is not something that he thought up, that he started. This is probably generational, that started way before him, and he knew how to quickly build those games and build that momentum because it had been done to him as well. Not saying it justifies his behavior, I'm just saying it does prove that there is a generational issue here. I also found it weird that the parents let the kids stay alone. All the kids stay alone in a brand new house that nobody knew that they hadn't moved into. I just thought that was weird. There's some red flags for the parents here. She said that Dawn had a pattern of behavior where anytime she was playing in her room, he would go to the bathroom, and that's how he would check to see if she was alone and if he had access to her. At night, when he got caught once by the father, he said he was sleepwalking, and it seems like the father perhaps did not want to press the issue, so that became his out. He began having a sleepwalking issue. All of these things are red flags because the parent that sees a child have a sleepwalking issue, catches them once, catches them twice, and then we start to have a pattern. Now that should mean you should check into something a little bit more in depth because there's something else going on there. So that's another red flag that probably Dawn's dad, knew exactly what was going on. She said that as she got older, that's when the threats became part of the game, as in be secretive, don't tell about this, you don't want me to get hurt, you don't want somebody to tell on me. Basically, he was saying that he began putting that emotional burden on the child. She was still a child too, but he was thinking as a predator. So this was pure predation upon a kid because mentally he was not a child. But he would burden her with the emotional. Don't make me get caught. You'll make me go to prison. You'll hurt the family. This, it'll be all your fault. That's normal as well. But also, the way that he used it and the way that he applied it shows a maturity far beyond his years, which again kicks me back and makes me think, okay, something was happening. He's witnessed something or had something done to him where he's learned this. This is learned behavior. There's got to be a long history, because these deep-seated tactics, like, when he went in and attempted to assault the little girlfriend that was spending the night, and that gave Jeannie the power to come out the next morning and say, I want this to stop, I just want it to stop. The mother, I think, thought this was an opportunity where she could address the issue, but the dad just kabushed it. Just, it ain't gonna happen. We're not gonna do it. And not only did that hurt Jeannie emotionally and make her feel unsafe and make Don know that he could carry this out until God knows when, it also shows the dynamic of the family again, that there's something in there that's wrong. Because most parents that have something like that happen, yes, it's, it's something that we probably feel guilt or shame over, but it's also something that most parents would probably say, we need help, we need outside help from this, we need authorities here, we need something going on that can help us. And that's like the second or third time that the stepdad, Dawn's dad, kiboshed any kind of aid. Another red flag. Something's been going on for a while in this family. When it became very super aggressive was when it transitioned into night attacks, and that was again when we saw his predation grow. The maturation of his criminogenic behavior at 12 to 13, I would put with most people around 24 to 27. And that would be where he would probably fall on my scale of people that I've seen in court for these, for similar charges like this. So that tells us, what ages people prematurely. Knowledge that you shouldn't get at specific ages, because it makes you grow up prematurely. So Don has most likely witnessed or been the victim of something himself, most likely, because that's how all the pieces are lining up for me personally. Again, it doesn't mean I have any sympathy for the man. It doesn't mean it justifies his behavior. It just means that that's what I'm picking up. That this is something that's been going on for a while, and at least half the family knew it. But I was just so happy that Chris again was like, he gave a little information on how sex offenders, they have past behaviors that normally indicate future behaviors, and once they get to a certain threshold, they completely, once their criminogenic behavior matures to a certain level, they cross this threshold to where they have absolutely no impulse control. Absolutely none whatsoever. There is a little door in your brain that once you go through it, you are irrevocably harmed. You cannot turn around. We can't get you back. And that is something that you see predominantly with sex offenders. That is something, I would always tell people, sex offenders are not really rehabilitated, and they are taught to function within the boundaries of societal construct. They're never really rehabilitated, because this is something that is, it goes far beyond a biological urge, far beyond a psychological deprivation. It is a mixture of everything that is functioning incorrectly, and impulse control that cannot happen. So it's something that is never really rehabilitated. Now, I wrote down some thoughts, so I'm gonna see if I can read my own handwriting. Bear with me, because I was writing really fast. Sexual abuse is perpetrated by individuals who are growing with their victims, emotionally, mentally, and physically. They're driven to show maturation of skills and complete heinous tasks due to an internal predatory inclination that we would recognize as a malformation with abominable acts. And to them, this is a natural progression to the urges and signals that their predatory mind is receiving. They continue until caught and convicted and jailed, or until they're found and something really bad happens. Rehabilitation is never truly able to occur. It is best referred to as impulse control and conforming to society's expectations and moral boundaries. Okay, so then we went on in the interview, and it really got me when Jeannie said, until he went to prison, it was routine. 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 And then she said, and then she said when Chris basically said, how many times did it occur? And she said it was almost a nightly thing. And she goes, it wasn't that bad, but it was almost a nightly thing, well, at least 3 to 4 times a week. But then she said it was a routine. When the friend stayed the night and Jeannie said she was concerned, friends and family may see protective behavior from a child that they put on others, like their friends or something. They may see that as like belligerence or oppositional defiance, or going against authority, or even an undiagnosed fear that the parent believes the kid will grow out of. Like they're having an irrational fear that the house is going to burn down, so every night they wake up screaming and rush the family to the living room to make sure all the units on the stove are off and everything's locked tight and safe. A lot of parents will throw these things into just the irrational. They're growing up, they're maturing, they don't understand. Sometimes it can be ring the bell of something's going on that is causing them to seek control in other ways. So if they get super, super, super aggressively protective of friends, animals, siblings, something, parents, please pick up on this, because they can't really save themselves, so they look to try to save everyone else. And then I wrote some more stuff. Let's see if I can read it. Okay, when she went to the parents and said, I want this to stop, and then Dawn's dad basically said, if you report this to the wife, if you report this, it will end in divorce. When a parent has participated in behaviors as they grew up, they create an ongoing cycle of willful ignorance and deceptive tactics and techniques that grow through the generations as almost a fine wine recipe. These secrets are handed down not via word of mouth for safekeeping as a cherished recipe, but through continued and generational role play and victimization, with the ability to manipulate and defy and dodge law enforcement and anybody with keen eyes. Generational sexual abuse that has been hidden, where the abusers all have knowledge that they know each other, and they also know that they're all abusing. They kind of create this little protective bond and this little demented brotherhood, and so they kind of protect each other. And I think that may be why Dawn's dad was being protective of Dawn, because if Dawn's secret got out, and then his secret got out, and potentially the secret before that, this could be a very long-going, deep-seated issue within this family that could potentially be more heinous than we could even imagine. Even though we know all of this other questionable stuff, it could be far worse than that. So we don't really know what the potential is, but we know that there's a capacity here for harm, because they have verbalized it, he has agreed to it, he has said yes, that did occur, and so we know there is a capacity to harm within this family. We just don't know where the boundaries are in that capacity, and that's for law enforcement to decide with this investigation into this. I think that Mom knew by the behavior that Jeannie was speaking of, and Mom taking advantage of situations, wanting to speak out but being threatened. I think Mom knew. Or Mom had been victimized at some point by somebody, someone, somewhere down the line, or she just blank knew. At 31:51, Jeannie became tearful when she was talking about how she would use preventative measures of wearing multiple pairs of pants. She became emotional because that was her only defense. That's the only time she really broke down, but it was because that was the only thing that she ever did that she thought could be her salvation. That was her only defense mechanism. Nothing else did she believe in that could save her. That tells me she believed in she didn't believe in her parents were going to listen to her anymore, that some adult was going to rescue her, that some agency was going to figure her out, that law enforcement was going to trip upon this, because she didn't become emotional with any of that discussion. She only became emotional when she started talking about, I would put on multiple pairs of pants as a barrier, as a boundary against this man. That's when she became emotional, because that was the one defense mechanism that she believed in that failed her. And that tells me this little girl had such limited resources when she was tiny. I can't imagine what kind of home life she had. I can't imagine what else she went through that she's not volunteering information on. It must have been horrendous. And I wrote more. Many victims often attempt at some age to rein in a feeling of power over sexual abuse by trying to feign that they have become the master of their own sexual maturity. This often leads to even more dangerous sexual encounters and even other forms of abuse where they feel I confuse myself when I write. But basically what they're doing is the one thing they fear, which is someone misusing that one format of affection and love and physical contact, they then try to overcompensate and say, well, I control it. So they'll go and do even worse things, because then they can look back and say, see, that wasn't that bad. See, if I can do this and I can handle this and I can do this to myself, then that wasn't that bad and I can live with it. And that creates someone that, will go into the porn industry, that will go into prostitution, even go into legal prostitution, and actually talk about it, share it, revel in it, make a big deal about it, celebrate it. They'll have these advanced views on feminism and sexual encounters, and it will be very confusing to the rest of their family that doesn't understand where this is coming from, because they didn't witness this, they didn't see this. This just goes to show you how much children can bounce back, heal, block out, and choose to not deal with mentally. They can block it out and have a normal adulthood. That's how resilient children are. But sadly, the one kid that does become the target, they're screwed, and we can see that. So what they're trying to do when they overly correct like that and try to overly compensate, is they're trying to create scenarios so that they can say, I did this on my own, to myself. I was in control of that, so therefore what happened before that when I wasn't in control was not that bad. So I can live with this, I can cope with it. And they're trying to force healing, but what they don't understand is that's a false form of healing. That's not recognizing your victimhood. That's not recognizing that the other person was wrong. That is just proving how hard you can hurt your body and it bounce back, and how hard you can beat up your brain and heart and have them bounce back. It does not mean that you're healing or rectifying anything. It does not lead to any validation or vindication. It basically leads to more problems. And what they don't realize is that they cannot heal until they can truly identify the sexual abuse as wrong and understand their abuser did not love them. And that's one thing I really want to point to as I wind this up, is that you see, even though Jeannie went through all this and she tells all these heinous, horrendous, horrible things that occurred to her, she still shows love for Don. She still wanted him to be a good person. She still believed he could be a good person. She still did not wish bad things upon him. And if that does not tell you how deep-seated the manipulation and the power he had over this young lady was, I don't know where you've been the last few months, because this is really showing a different side of this man from a familiar relationship. And if somebody can do that to the people that they are blood with, imagine what they can do to people that they are not responsible to in any way, emotionally, mentally, physically. They have no bond there. The capacity for somebody to harm another, it just is opened 100-fold when they have no obligation to that other person in any way. They're basically just looking for the weakest of the herd to take out. It's really rough to say, but that's basically what they're doing. And for him to have been able to have done this at this age tells me that these are skills that he learned. He learned them at a very young age, but he probably had sexual abuse happen to him, and from how quickly he advanced with his behaviors and tactics on Jeannie, I would say that he went through something pretty dadgum traumatic. Again, doesn't justify his behavior and doesn't mean you should have sympathy for him. It just says that we can identify this is a generational issue, and there has been some pretty possibly horrendous acts going on for a long time, and therefore the behavior and the mentality and the emotional control and the manipulation is more deep-seated than if it was a newfound abuser and abuse tactic. It's like if you go to a blacksmith and they've got 3 apprentices. Do you want the apprentices or the blacksmith? Well, you want the blacksmith because he's the head guy. But after 2 or 3 generations of apprentices, they have actually built up such a knowledge that you can say that that apprentice that is now 23 is more knowledgeable than the blacksmith dude was 2 generations ago when he was 90, because they've all acquired the knowledge. They've been taught earlier, quicker, and they've learned the tactics that work better and what to not use, and it's all about honing your skill. And so yes, sadly, honing a skill does actually apply to criminogenic perpetrators as well. So that tells me that this could potentially have been more long-standing and generational in this family than I even thought from the get-go. So that kind of set me back a little bit, because I'm thinking now we've got a family that could have a pretty daggum bad issue and past, and could potentially be in a seat of authority and power within a group of individuals that are doing this for profit, which adds a whole nother concern to what's going on with Summer. At like 34:53, Chris steps in to help Jeannie, and he wants to help remind her that she has the power, because what he says is that your honesty and you telling us what happened to you is illuminating things that have possibly been missed by law enforcement, by family members, by God knows who, and you are basically a light being shown upon this that could potentially save her and others. So he's putting her in a position of power, which is great. She needs to understand that. But putting her in a position of power without having the support system and the therapy and everything set up for her is, ooh, that could do more harm in the long run than good. So I'm hoping that Chris, being the professional that he is, has already got her linked up with support systems and therapy at home and somebody to talk to, because this is unwittingly going to create a backwash of memories and behaviors for her to deal with now, and that's going to be a very real thing. That's just, it scares me to think about what she may be going through since having this discussion with him. I think the important thing that Jeannie learned from this whole interview, and yeah, we learned a lot from Jeannie, but I think the thing that Jeannie learned from this issue is that healing and taking back the power can start at any age. And I think Jeannie's like getting her power back now, and that is potentially going to break the cycle within this family, so that maybe no one else goes missing, there are no more issues, no one else goes to prison, nobody else's daughter gets raised getting, woken up every night and sexually molested by a family member. The fact that this did not stop until Dawn went to prison tells me that the family was in no way ready to step in and stop this. They were in no way ready to acknowledge it, and potentially they were dabbling in issues themselves. Perhaps the father was, to where he was not going to address it because perhaps he just saw it as a way of life. Now that's just my opinion on things. There's no evidence to say that. That's just what makes me think, because it's learned behavior, and the behavior that Dawn is exhibiting is so mature for someone his age to be applying to someone of her age, that I'm just thinking he was schooled by having it done to him, and this is something that's been done for a couple of generations before Dawn. But I also want to point out to people that you see in this interview the deep-seated desire that a victim has to humanize their abuser. After everything Jeannie went through, she still wanted to humanize her abuser. And that is that emotional manipulation, and that is that victim's heart I mean, you see it in almost every victim because the predators scope out the people that have the biggest capacity to love, because they know that is going to be the person that's going to have the biggest capacity to overlook and play that game with them, so that they can manipulate them and use that as they can take them as an emotional hostage and use their own love, their own desire to see somebody reform. They could use that against them and basically victimize them their entire life by only using their own heart and their own desire to see humanity in a positive light no matter what has occurred. So I think that Chris prompted a lot of thought and internal dialogue within Jeannie, and I think that is going to be something that's going to benefit her. But I'm telling you, she needs to be in therapy. She needs to have her support system set up, because it's going to be tricky, it's going to be rough. But from my perspective, from the tips and clues and stuff that has been stated now, and I know I just kind of hastily went through this, y'all. I've not felt good. This is not put together as good as my other things have been, but I just wanted to get this out there because I know y'all are worried about me, but I also know y'all are going, what do you think? I think that from the clues and the statements that Jeannie made, that potentially she was not the only victim in her family, that potentially Don was victimized as a child. That is where he learned to mature and hone his skills so quickly and to transfer them so adeptly to an unwitting young child, and do it so successfully, so easily, and to have his own father cover his tracks. That tells me that this is potentially gone on before Jeannie. It had probably, most likely, in my opinion, happened to Don. And potentially, I would have the opinion that the grandfather, Don's father, was potentially someone who was also an offender, was also a perpetrator, and that it could even go potentially deeper than that. And with the multiple states they've lived in, the moves, and every time DCS gets onto them, and prison in multiple states, it would probably tell me that there's an affiliation with a group of people, and that would not surprise me if it did, if it was true. If my opinion that they have a, in my opinion, they have a relationship with a ring of people that probably participate in this, and it's just a daily life occurrence for them. And I have absolutely no positive vibes after that interview, none, because that just tells me that this was not a new abuse scenario or a one-off. This was something that this is potentially a way of functioning for a group of people, and it's existed for a few generations at least. And again, just my opinion based on what has been divulged by the people themselves. No one's been arrested or convicted or charged. It's just my opinion, but that's where my opinion falls. And I'm sorry it's so scatterbrained, but I've been so sick, y'all. But I wanted to get it out there. And one thing I keep saying, you know, people have such manipulation, ease of manipulation on other people. And people don't understand, well, how can you be so easily manipulated? How could you accept that behavior? How could you live through that? How could you? Well, listen, when somebody attacks you every day and puts you in fear every day and makes you feel terrified and puts you through a man-made hell, they do that because you will accept a cardboard heaven. If everything is so super bad that you'll take any reprieve, even if it's not the reprieve you desire, deserve, or want, you'll take any reprieve. So they do that, and they push their victims, and they push them into a place to where if they give them any reprieve, it plays again on that emotional turmoil on that victim. Well, see, he is a good guy. He gave me that. He gave me that. But really, he didn't give you anything. He just stopped forcing the hell upon you, and you just got to breathe for a second. But just remember that, you know, it's when people want to keep you upset or in a drama state or in a fear state, and you kind of go, why are they doing that? People do that. They force you into a man-made hell so that you will accept a cardboard heaven. Think about that. Write that down and sit there and look at it and think about it for a few minutes. And then think about how many people, if they had read that statement and thought about it for 10 minutes at some point in their life, they would not be in a position they're in today. I would probably say 80% of the globe right now would love to have had 5 minutes of that thought about 2 years ago. But that is exactly what happens in these sexual abuse cases, where these people are oppressed in such a way that any reprieve turns their oppressor into a saint, and they become so discombobulated and jumbled in, you know, in their upstairs, that life, you know, and understanding good and evil, and it's become so intertwined they can't pull it apart and see one from the other. They just know they feel that pressure release from time to time, and it was because of that person, and so I should be thankful. And so they, you know, they've got them so deep at that point that you almost never get a victim statement from them. So for this lady to speak out at this age, very proud of her, but I also know it's going to be very difficult, so bless her heart. I'm going to shut up now. Yep, I've been sick. That's my perspective. That's all I got to say. So until I see the rest of it, or until I come across something else that sparks me, MommaLiz out.